Okay, this is on. And this is pretty sensitive, so you don't have to
so I
yell
should
into
watch
it.
my cursing, right? This.
Good morning, everybody. This is our monthly local management board meeting, but we aren't going to do any regular board business today. We're going to just do the data dive that we planned. So the minutes and everything will be sent in November. And so welcome. We are doing our 3-year planning process. The local management boards are charged with bringing together all of the community's important stakeholders for working with children, youth, and families, and trying to make sure we have a coordinated approach, really guiding us together as a group and making sure that we're not duplicating services, that we're identifying gaps, that we are clued into what's really going on in the community, and part of that is really looking closely at the data that's available. And so we have just begun this process in September, and we have contracted with Just Cause Consulting, and they have helped us put together this working database, and we will be using it for the next 3 years, keeping it updated and sharing it. So I am more than happy to share this actual Excel file with everybody who's here, as long as you give me your email. And the next phase of the process, we've put out a request for proposals for folks to apply to help us take the data to the community, see what the community says, what are the factors that are causing data to turn in one direction or to stay stable, and making sure that we really are engaged with the populations that are affected, and that the agencies are aware, and that we're all kind of buying into what priorities emerge from this process. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Linda Walls. And after Linda clues us in about our specific objectives for today, we will introduce ourselves one by one. So if you can just share your name and where you're coming from, your agency or your interest here today. And I will ask you to use the microphones because we are live streaming this meeting to this morning, and if we don't use the microphone, then the people who are watching online can't hear hardly anything. So even though we can hear each other fine, we're doing it for those who are live streaming. Okay? So, Linda.
Okay. Now I know why we have to have a microphone. It's okay. So hi, everybody. This is really exciting to see so many old friends and then new friends, too. And I know some of you are on the board and some are here as guests or are coming to an LMB meeting perhaps for the first time. If you are, raise your hand if you've never. Oh, right. That's great. Okay, so I'll give you a background. You too, Charlie. I'll give you some background in a few minutes about the process that we're working in for this. But so our first objective would be to help familiarize you with the framework that we're working in. It's really cool, and it's something that I think will help most people understand. Some already get it and understand it, but why we set certain results or goals and how we measure whether we're making a difference or not. So this whole framework that the local management boards use, and actually 40 different countries are using now, is called results-based accountability or results accountability. And we're going to be getting to some results today. So that would be another objective, too. I also want to share with you some demographic background about Kent County. So that will be up front before we start getting into the data. And then we're going to share data that we've been working on for a few months now. And what is looking concerning about the data, and maybe what we can celebrate about the data, and then there's other data that would provide a little caution for us to kind of step back and rethink or maybe look at a little more closely. We are also going to discuss something called relative rate index, and that's actually on the agenda at the bottom, but I'll tell you what that's all about. Oh, I see you added the data points. That was a good idea. Thanks. I'll explain that and define that for you, and then we'll have a little short discussion about geomapping and the potential for that in Kent County and the tool that it can be for a community. We will, at the end of the time this morning, we're going to be talking about next steps. And the next step is planning based on this data. But we'll get into a little more discussion about that as well. So that's our objectives for today.
Start with introductions. Sure. Make sure you turn on the mic.
I was colorblind, so it took me a second to tell that it turned green. My name is Charlie Barton. I'm an Episcopal priest, an artist, and an entrepreneur. I've started 5 small companies. I'm very interested in building communities that work. And I have a fair amount of experience in doing that in North Baltimore County and Baltimore City.
I'm Shelley Heller. I'm the county administrator for Kent County.
I am Wendy Keene. I'm the supervisor of special education for Kent County.
Good morning, Gina Giacomowitz, Director of Teaching and Learning for Kent County Public Schools.
I'm Annie Woodall from Kent County Public Library.
I'm Bill Clark. I'm the chairman of I work for the Department of Juvenile Services here in the county.
I'm Maggie Crew. I'm the delegating nurse for Kent County Middle School, Galena Elementary School, and Rock Hall Elementary School.
I'm Gail Yerke. I work at the Kent County Health Department, and I'm a member of the management board.
Start here.
And pass this around.
Hi, I'm Laura Bayatis. I'm here on behalf of my company, American Philanthropic, a consulting firm. We're interested in responding to the RFP.
Good morning. I'm Don Sella-Wilson, the Systems of Care Coordinator with the Local Management Board.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ileana Lindstrom. I am a trauma-informed psychologist in independent practice here in Chestertown, consulting, treating individuals and groups, and also consulting organizations that have experienced negative effects of trauma. I'm also a member of the Social Action Committee, which is a community organization here in our county focused on dismantling racism.
Hi, I'm Liz Janiga. I'm an individual interested in learning about writing grants, and I'm also going to be speaking for Sabine on behalf of the University of Maryland Kent County Extension Office later.
Hi, good morning. My name is Shelley Neal Edwards. I am a board member of the Local Management Board as well as the Director of Kent County Department of Social Services.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Falls, and I'm the Assistant Director at Kent County Department of Social Services. Good morning. I'm Myra Butler, Director of Kent County Parks and Recreation, and I also serve as chair for Vice Chair for the Local Management Board.
Good morning. I'm Francoise Sullivan. I'm also a local resident, but I am a member of Support Our Schools and currently running for Board of Ed candidate. So, thank you.
My name is Sabine Harvey. I work at the University of Maryland Extension here in Kent County. And I also do a lot of stuff with kids, with the public schools, and my area of expertise is horticulture and growing food. So I can't stay for the whole time, but we're looking into creating a food summit in January to get producers together and people who need food, and trying to see if we can make better connections.
Good morning. Deanne Jones, a member of the Local Management Board and Director of Character Counts, Kent County.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Thompson, and I am with Mitchell Behavioral Health, and I am newly to the role of Behavioral Health Coordinator for Kent, Caroline, and special populations, including veterans, minorities, and the LGBT community.
Okay, great. And if someone new comes in, if someone in the back wouldn't mind kind of just giving them a brief summary of what we've gotten accomplished so far this morning, that would be great, and indicate to them to talk into the mic if there is an opportunity to do that later on, which there will be. I have handed out some index cards to everybody. And what I would like you to do is two things. The first is to write on the top of one side of the index card. Does anybody need a pen or a pencil? Oh, yeah. I think they're, yeah. Okay, great. Strengths at the top. Put the date on it, too, if you don't mind, of today. So when I look at this later, I'll know which day they're attached to. Anyway, the date at the top in the corner, don't put your name on it, and then write the word strengths at the top on one side and challenges at the top on the other side. And what I would like to ask you to do is to, as the morning progresses, if you wouldn't mind, if something occurs to you that's a strength about this data audit, this data dive, jot it down. And if there's something that you think is a challenge that could be done better, could be improved upon, please be honest and also write that down too. And then I want to ask for a volunteer who wouldn't mind picking those up at the end or as folks walk out. Is there somebody that wouldn't mind collecting? Charlie will take them. Thank you, Charlie. But if you do have to leave early, if you don't mind leaving your card on that table back there, and then Charlie will make sure they get transferred over to me. Then the second card is an opportunity for you as we're talking, if you have any suggestions. It might be a data suggestion of something that you think would be beneficial to add. It may be very clearly a set of data that you know about that maybe we didn't know about. Because I've been doing needs assessments for almost 30 years on the shore, and I learned some new data treasures during this process. So we can always learn from each other. So if you don't mind writing that on the next card, and you can just put a suggestion at the top of that one, and then we'll be able to look at that if you don't get a chance to say something during the process. And by the way, I do welcome you to raise your hand if you have any questions as we're moving along. So I'm going to just give you a brief overview of this process and what led up to it. And I know that the LMB board members have heard this over and over again about the 8 result areas, but it never hurts to review, but I'm going to briefly touch on that too. So the local management boards appeared around 1995 to 1997 on the Eastern Shore and in the rest of the state. And there used to be regional local management boards, but then it came that every single county was able to get the funding for a local management board. And the idea of the boards was not to provide programming, but to recognize the needs in the community and then help coordinate and facilitate a response to those needs strictly around child and family well-being. So that occurred almost 20 years ago, and all the local management boards have a long track record by now. Each local management board, about every 2 to 3 years, conducts a needs assessment, and this time it's called a data audit or data dive. I like these new exciting names because it kind of freshens it all up. But anyway, and that usually consists of separating out, looking at data, and then separating it out into 8 categories called result areas. So in 1995, the Governor's Office of Children, I don't even remember what they were called then, I bet Bill knows, but they were called something different at that time. Was it Children, Youth, and Families? Yes, Shelley remembers. Anyway, they had actually 9 result areas, including healthy adults. But the result areas are in a lifespan, beginning with babies born healthy, then healthy children, then children entering school ready to learn, then children successful in school, children completing school, opportunities for career and what's the other one? Employment, thank you. Yes, thank you. And families safe and also stable families and community too. Did I miss one? Used to be communities. Yeah, that's close enough. Anyway, they've kind of evolved too. They've changed even more over the years, but there's still 8 of those. And they are written like a goal. So when you say babies born healthy, that's considered a goal. You know, we all want our babies to be born healthy, and we want healthy children too as it moves through the lifespan. So that's stated as a goal or as a result or outcome. People have different language for different for the word goal, for example. But in this environment or framework that we use, results-based accountability, we say results. So these are result areas. So what the LMB has chosen to do this round and in many prior rounds is to collect indicator data that fits under that result. And the Governor's Office for Children kind of suggests that, what those indicators are, but we are allowed to add to it or to move them around possibly in a different result. And those are indicators that help us know whether that result is being achieved or not. So I'm going to ask you to, and those of you that are on the LMB and know this by heart and in your sleep and everything, you can hold off for a minute. I'm going to ask some of the new folks. So if I were to ask you what an indicator is for healthy children, what might you guess that could be? Liz? Yes, you nailed it. I wish I had some prizes to give out because you would have gotten the first one. Yes, low birth weight infants. It might be infant mortality. It might be care, prenatal care. Yep, thank you. And then that moves on. So when we start talking about school and success in school, of course, there would be some logical indicators that would go with that, too, like academic performance and attendance and truancy and graduation and dropout rates and that sort of thing. So those are all very important to help us know whether we're reaching those result areas. But the important thing is we can't be all things to all people. So we can't tackle all 8 result areas as a local management board. There are other agencies that are tackling the result areas for well-being for children and families. So what we hope is to partner with those to recognize any gaps that might exist in the community. And most of the time, it's not because an agency isn't doing their job or a nonprofit isn't. It's because there's emerging issues. Like a big emerging issue right now is, yeah, exactly. Charlie said opioids, and that's a big emerging issue. Some of us would say, you know, that's been around for a long time, and crack cocaine was around before that, too. So anyway, but all those things show up in our communities, and then we have an opportunity as a local management board to recognize that and maybe facilitate support in that area. And I'm not always talking about financial support. There's trainings that can go on. We're all about, the local management boards are all about low cost and no cost strategies. So anyway, so these indicators then, if you look at them over years and not just 1 year at a time, but you look at them over years, they help us know whether we are turning the curve. As Rosemary mentioned a few minutes ago, we want to turn the curve in the right direction when we look at trends in those indicators. So an assessment like this or a data audit lets us know whether the curve is turning. And just because the curve is turning in a positive direction, it doesn't mean that we would abandon an indicator. But we will be looking at indicators that aren't going in the right direction as well to see if maybe some more support is needed there. So this process is that process of looking at the 8 result areas. I can't believe I said that when it hasn't been 9 for like 15 years. Looking at the 8 result areas and then looking at the indicators that match those and the direction that they're moving in. And there's probably, I think there's 28 to 30 indicators that the Governor's Office for Children suggests. And then we take those and tease them out a lot. And so this year we decided to, we're looking at 5 years, tracking 5 years where the data is available, because sometimes it's not available, or sometimes the measurements change or the policies change, so things are collected in a different way, and when that happens, it doesn't make any sense to compare apples with oranges. So we may have 2 or 3 years worth of trend data, or it may be the first year for a data indicator. So that can happen too. So we're looking at 5 years. We also decided to kind of select a county, and this was not an easy thing to do. There's this really cool quick facts site on the census where you can load up to 6 counties at a time and match them up and look at the key data about each county. I love that. And so I was looking at that with Jenny, who's been working with me on this project. And we, after everything was said and done, we decided to compare Kent County to Caroline County. There's some big differences, but there's also some similarities. So we wanted to look at them. We also wanted to look at Kent County and how we compare to the state of Maryland. So, of course, the Maryland data is an average of all the 24 jurisdictions, so that helps us know whether we're ahead of the average or behind the average. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's not so good. So that was another component to this. And then the third component was that we wanted to compare our data to average American residents, individuals in our community, because we have been noticing, and many of us are very aware of disparity or disproportionality, disproportionate minority contact. You can call it a lot of different things, but it's something that the local management board is very concerned about. So we also, and in some cases we cheated a little bit and added a few other subgroups to look at their data too, or we may have even looked at genders, but really we were charged just to look at the county, look at African American as a subgroup, and then Caroline County and the state of Maryland, and a 5-year trend. So that's the journey I'm about to take you on, is what happened with that. So we selected indicators based on the Children's Council, the Governor's Office for Children, and then in this process, and right now this is a draft, but it's very close to being finished. It's going to be finalized by November 1st or a few days after that. So then it'll be ready for widespread sharing at that point. But this is an opportunity for us to get your feedback so that when we finalize the document, we can include some of your suggestions and observations in the document. It may help us to polish some sections of it. So that's why you have the index cards too. So if you have any suggestions about that, that's very welcome. So when we were designing how this document would look, we decided to try to be as consistent as possible in the graphs. So we used line graphs, and then we also used what's called a linear projection, because we wanted to see if this data keeps moving in the way that it is, what's going to happen in a couple of years. And then that projection helps us to see. Sometimes when something's going like this, you don't know, is that really up or is that down? And the linear projection helps you to know that. So we included that and very carefully color-coded the counties, the state, the subgroup of African American individuals, the data associated with each of them, and then that matches over with the graphs. And the linear lines too. Everything's color-coded to that. So I just wanted to give you that piece of information too, so you would know that that was our intention as we were moving along. And then I did a rating of sorts. There's going to be a more in-depth look at the data as we move along toward the planning process, but there are 3 colors that are real easy to remember, and that is red, green, and yellow. And you can imagine probably what that means. So red means that it's concerning. There's some concerning data, and we need to stop and pay attention and take a look at it more closely. And then yellow is caution. It may be that we're seeing zigzag. Maybe there was a recent year where this number was way high and it didn't need to be. It shouldn't be way high. So that means we're going to take caution and look at that and keep an eye on it. And then green is, yay, let's celebrate. We're doing real good. And believe me, there are a lot of areas that this county is doing great. But back to that. So you'll see as we move through the pages that some of the indicators are color-coded, and that means that that's kind of a ranking to give us a heads up. So this is arranged the way that the local management board wanted this document, which thrilled me, was because I usually do these and there's a big narrative. And this is a spreadsheet. And what I did I used an Excel spreadsheet, and then each tab was the 8 result areas. So then all the data is placed, the indicators for that result area in that tab. But it's real important to understand the demographics of the county first, so that's the first tab. And then after the data is all listed, then we get to the end, and that's where the relative rate index is. That's the last tab. And the relative rate index tells us how much more likely is it a person, an African-American person, except there's one, the juvenile services relative rate index is all people of color. It's not just African Americans, so that one's the only one that includes all people of color, not white. And so the percentage and then the likelihood of the subgroup, in this case African Americans, being in this circumstance is what the relative rate index is compared to whites, okay? So I'll explain that some more when we get to that part of it, but that's a very important part of what we're doing. Okay, so this is up on the screen. It would have been pages and pages and pages and pages if we had handed it out at this point, but we're going to be massaging a little bit with your suggestions, and then you will get all those pages electronically instead of by paper. So I'm going to try to enlarge this as I'm talking about it. I'm going to give you some highlights and go through these result areas and just tell you a little bit about what's going on in this county in these 8 result areas. Is there water around anywhere? Does anybody know? Oh, okay, that would be great. I know. I had laryngitis last week. Yeah, so my throat's still a little bit dry. Okay. So in the demographic profile, in the first tab, and I want to know, can everybody see that pretty well? And you're welcome to move if you need to. What's included in this area is population estimates. I got to make sure this mic is close enough too. Population estimates, and then the 0 to 24 age distribution. We particularly look at that age group up to age 24 because one of the goals of the local management board, and actually there's 4 goals statewide that I need to mention, and that the governor's office and the governor himself enthusiastically endorsed a couple years ago. They said, in addition to your result areas, could you look at homelessness, give it an extra, and homelessness would be included in the results areas anyway, and hunger, can you give that an extra look? And can you also look at families that are affected by an incarcerated individual, either formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated? And then the 4th area, thank you so much, The fourth area is what are called opportunity youth, and that's age 16 to 24, and thus the look at up to age 24. This is kind of broken down into age groups that match the result areas. So opportunity youth are young adults ages 16 to 24 who aren't in school and aren't working. Now, we know that when you're 16 now, you're supposed to be in school. You can't get out until you're 18. You can't leave until you're 18. But that happened after these goals were described, and there still are people that are not in school under the age of 18. So that's important. That age range of 16 to 24 is really important to the local management board, to the governor as well, too. And then we are going to look twice in two different places in here, but it's so important as a basis for understanding the county to examine children living below poverty and about what percentage those are in our county. And I have average household income here, but I'm still working on that one because I'm trying to get that broken down also by race, so that'll be added. Okay, so is there a mouse here? Is it on? Oh, okay, all right. I can put it up here. Yeah, okay. So just a few things about population estimates, and there's that chart that I mentioned. Oh, the other thing I forgot to say is that everything is sourced in sources. So all the data that we collect is not things that we think up or assume. They all come from valid sources. And what we try to do is always use the agency or the state level or the federal level source. And sometimes that information may be still in the process of being populated. And so then we have wonderful people like Lisa and Shelley who we ding-donged and said, we need this data. They were so incredible and helped us to fill in the blank, as did some of the other board members too, and we appreciated that. But we try to look at solid sources when we come up with these data tables. I have highlighted some things just as I went along that helped me to, and I'm hoping would help you and the local management board too, just to say, okay, we need to look at this a little bit closer. But when we look at the distribution, let's see, that's the estimated population, and we use estimated. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It depends on how many years we are from the census, from the decade census, and we're so far from that census that I went on ahead and pulled the estimated population for the community, and you can see that it is dropping for the subgroup of white and African American. Well, the whole county's dropping. If you look, you probably knew that, right? That the population in Kent County is getting less. But I'm real curious to see what happens when the actual census happens, because I have a little shop in town, and I tell you, it seems like everybody that comes in there just moved here. So I'm like, how can these numbers be going down when all these people just moved here? Charlie's one who just moved here about a year ago. Other people in here just moved here recently in the last. Great, welcome. Welcome to you too. So there's a lot of people coming into town. But the numbers are dropping, so you see what's happening there. And I'll tell you something unique that's going on in our neighboring county is Queen Anne's County's numbers are going up, but the African American population is dropping, and it's less than it was in 1960 in that county. That's a big loss for the community, I think. So then, just how that distributes out, just did that for 2017. And this is an opportunity where I did include Hispanic, but also, or Latino. But what is happening with that population too is that they're disappearing, and we're seeing evidence. You'll see that in some of the other data too. So they were going up, and then they started going down. Okay, now the 0 to 24. I went on ahead and just repeated the ultimate total of population there on the left. But here's how the 0 to 24 splits out. And there are beautiful, well, I'll just show you just so you get a taste, because I love this stuff. But so here's the 0 to 24 age distribution, and then there you see what's happening. It's pretty married between the years. But anyway, there's the linear projections that are there too. But I'll go back to the table for now. So I highlighted, oh yeah. There we go. More room. Okay. Zoom in. Is that good? Zoom. Yeah, okay. All right, so there we go. So I highlighted the 1 to 4 age group because it's dropping. The number of births, of course, are dropping, and then this group is dropping and that group is dropping, and that's our child age group that is dropping. And then let me see. So poverty, and I'll explain what. So anybody this is child poverty, so it's for under 18-year-olds. So the first thing I do is present the number of people that are in the age groups, or per year. These are subgroups instead. But on the left are the years, and then so all the actual population under 18 is listed there. And remember, again, that these are projections, but they're projections based on births, deaths, movement of the armed forces, and there's one other thing that they base those projections on. So this is the number of individuals who are white living in poverty under 18, and this is the African American resident and children who are living in poverty, and then Hispanic, Latino living in poverty. And see this number here, how it dropped drastically, 11 to 0 to 16. That's what told me that something's happening. There's some kind of movement going on. And then here's Caroline County, and then Maryland. And, when we're just talking numbers instead of rates, the Maryland population is kind of, it's just a reference point, that's all. But it doesn't really do much for us in here because we really can't compare to the whole state. But just on numbers, we do that on rates instead. But you can see what's happened here, the white population. There's been a drastic increase, and it's up to 55% of the children in this county who are white are living in poverty. That's something the black community has been dealing with for years, for decades. And I think that possibly these numbers may be going down for another reason, that people are moving. There's been a lot of displacement that's happened in the community and in the county too. But anyway, something to ponder. And then, let's see, here's the percentages, and that's where Maryland does come in. So we look at what's happening and see here, even in 2015, 48.39% of the African American population was living in poverty. They're children under 18 in this county. And you compare that, you would think Caroline County would be really high. That's kind of the way that I've viewed them. And look where they are, and look where Maryland is compared to where Kent County's subpopulations are. So this is one of those red areas to say, okay, what's going on here? It's something that we need to take a closer look at. Okay, let's see. All right, so those are the tables, and they each have a chart that's over to the right that go with the tables too, that you can look at your leisure later on if you'd like, if you're a chart kind of person. Okay, so then we go to the first. Any questions about that so far? Yes. What do you all think about that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you said that, because what's your first name again? Laura. Laura, I'm glad you asked that, because that When we talk about turning the curve and creating plans, a very important part of examining these indicators is the story behind the indicators. And then that's the opportunity to discuss what's happening. Why do we think those numbers are going up or down? And that's also where surveys come in and focus groups and key informant interviews come in. They help explain what the story might be behind the indicators. So thank you. That was a good transition to that. And I forgot to hold my mic during that time. I hope I don't get a demerit. Anyway, so babies born healthy is our first result area. And births to adolescence, I guess you all know, they've been going way down. And that's kind of been happening across the board. But low birth weight babies and infant mortality, of course, we're always going to be concerned about. I mean, even if the numbers are 0, we still want to keep it that way. So I put the caution yellow there. But late prenatal care, I'm seeing some increases in the percentage of people that aren't getting prenatal care till the 3rd trimester. So that's mostly what, and I also put a reference table there for the number of births so you can see how they distribute out. And here's another telling item that for African Americans, the number of births have gone from 35 to 22. That's a big jump down. It did it once before too, but anyway.
Liz, I have a question.
Yes.
Under the late prenatal care being highlighted in red, is it fair to assume that that's due to the uncertainty in the health insurance market and the cost of premium?
Yeah, that would probably be a story behind, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. Right, and so many people are afraid to go even inquire about it because even if they may be eligible, they're worried, that something could happen to them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And even those that have insurance, their deductibles are so high that I know of people that delay their care or they try to stretch out. The elderly's doing it a lot too, stretching out their prescriptions, like taking a pill every 2 days or every 3 days instead of every day to stretch out. And so that must be affecting the entire population in different ways. And I wish there wasn't so much shame around it, that people would talk about it so that they can get the supports they need. So here, this is prenatal care. Wait a minute. Let me make sure that's what it is. I need to look above it. Yeah, late prenatal care. So, look, it was down pretty low here in 2014, but still, these rates are higher than the state of Maryland. And in these years, they're higher than Caroline County, too. And then here's the disparity in Kent County between the full population and the African American population. And then you see the full population percentage of those getting late prenatal care instead of early care going up, too. Anybody know? Anybody in multi-county? Yes. Uh-huh.
I'm not sure this past year, but they did have a grant, the health department, I think that was the only one on Eastern Shore that had prenatal care, actual prenatal care, not delivery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, it might be. Is it Sharon? Sharon. Okay. Just trying to remember. Yes. That's a great idea. Can you write that on your suggestion card too? And then the reason that Rosemary's popping up and down, you'll see her popping up and down. She's writing down some of the indicators that we see as concerning the red flagged ones, especially because then as the planning resumes, they'll be up there at the top of the consideration pyramid or whatever it'll be. Okay, so then we're going to move on to healthy children. I mean, I could get into a lot more detail, but I'm just trying to hit the highlights for now, or we'd be here all day long. Okay, so, oh yeah, I was like, where's the graphs? My beautiful graphs. So the indicators under healthy children are immunizations, and that's a tough one because it's hard to get local rates. They're kept nationally and by the state, but there isn't a central repository that I'm aware of, and if I'm wrong and somebody knows one, write that on your card. But I went on ahead and put in what the immunizations look like for Maryland and our subgroups and the United States too, to see what the rates are, because it looks like they're running around 75%. And this is for the Series 7, so that's the most of the, I guess that's, is there anybody here that's a nurse or from the health department? Hi. So is the Series 7 like the complete list of? Yeah, me either. I was trying to read up on it. I was going to like quote each shot, but I just didn't get that far and tell you what they were. And then death rates to children ages 0 to 21 per 100,000 of the population. Whenever those rankings of the per 100,000 or 10,000 in our small little counties show up, and that's the way, it's a way at least to try to see where we fit with other jurisdictions, but I'm always suspect of it. And I think the local numbers tell the story, and unfortunately this is a very sad story. So, and then obesity, and this is child obesity, another indicator. Health insurance coverage, we were just talking about that. Adolescent substance use, and then suicide, and then I added, I hope that was okay, Rosemary, I added sad and hopeless feelings because I think that's a precursor that is nice to track, and we happen to have a survey and that's Maryland does in odd years. They did it in 2013, 2014, and then they did it 2016. So hopefully it's coming up again, and it's called the Maryland Youth Risk Behavior Survey, YRBS. I may not have said that in the right order, but anyway, that's the survey, and they ask students in high school, grades 9 through 12, if they're feeling sad or hopeless. And so I have some data around that too. So the things that I saw, I saw caution in all of those areas, especially whenever there's a child death. That should always be caution, I think. But anyway, the obesity and the adolescent substance use came up very clearly. Let's see. Yes. Oh, good. Mm. Did you text somebody and then they gave you the answer while you were sitting there? Oh, okay. All right. I was like, that's so cool. Okay. All right. Okay.
Series of 7, I've just never heard it put that.
Uh-huh.
But NAs and the RNs, all the children, they are not allowed to be in school unless they have all
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And the health department does give. So we, according to our records, we have very low numbers for children that do not have
Uh-huh.
medications. Most of them are because of religious beliefs.
or allergies even. I think to some immunizations, aren't there allergies too? Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. So is that data accessible by county, do you know?
So we send a immunization survey to the state.
Uh-huh.
There's one person responsible for that, and it's Callie. For sure, I can get you more information.
Okay. Okay. I know that Governor's Office of Children tracks it, and they don't even have the jurisdictional data. They only have the state and the federal. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. Great. That's great. So, or you can just write it on the card. If you write it on the card, and then I'll get it too. Okay. And my email's lindaroywalls@gmail.com, so that's pretty easy too. My middle name's Roy, like a guy, Roy. That was my great-grandfather's name, so I was named after him. Yeah. Anyway, so let's see. So the immunizations, I explained about that. The death rates are so low that, and that's a good thing that they're low, but so that they don't show up they show up usually as 3 asterisks when they're less than 5, and they do that to protect communities, especially small communities like ours. I think it would be hard to be someone that lost a child and then saw them as a number in a table. So that might be, part of it, and I've heard that explanation before too. But let's see. I know that there were 3 for Kent and 2 for Caroline in 2017. And this is for children ages 0 to 21 per 100,000, but those are actual numbers. And those numbers were not divided according to race either. Okay, so obesity. And the way that obesity is determined is by the survey, the Youth Behavior Risk Survey, and they actually ask students. And students are learning about that and what that ceiling is, and so they can, with knowledge, usually answer that question in the survey. So they ask the question about, are you obese, and then they respond. And so here's what we have for obesity among high school students. And actually, this is not just this is not overweight and obese. It's just obese. So I need to make that correction there. But anyway, so there's the percentages from those 3 surveys, and the percentage for African American. You can see that there's disproportionality there for both years. And then we also have a tendency to be higher than the state, slightly higher than the state. So that's why I list that as an issue. And so also you can see that trend line going up there for African Americans. And then health insurance coverage. So this comes from the American Community Survey, which is part of the census, and it comes out several times in a decade and asks questions about lots of things other than who's in your household. So for health insurance coverage, this is where Kent County is, and it is, these are uninsured in this table here and in this graph here. So you can see that that the numbers are lower, even though they are going lower, which is great, that the percentage is lower than it has been in prior years. It's a caution too, because it's still higher than the state of Maryland. So that's concerning. Okay, adolescent substance abuse or use, boy. Okay, so I know that the Tobacco Coalition in this county works like crazy, and I didn't include tobacco in here. They're doing so much. They're still around, right? the Tobacco Coalition, Mary Walker, and yeah, the gang. I used to go to that years ago too when I lived in town, and I hope to go back when I move back here soon. But anyway, so as you know, when we would look at the Maryland Adolescent Survey that was around years ago, we stuck to 30-day use as being the primary indicator of whether use was going on. And anyway, and then typically counties like to look at 4 different substances primarily. And I know the coalition here in this county, the drug-free coalition in this county, looks at alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, and heroin and tobacco. So I picked the 3, alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs. I could have also reported on heroin separately. It's a separate question in the survey. Fortunately, it is still low, but this is what the precursor is. Marijuana and prescription drugs are the precursor. There's a lot of proof around that, and you know, some of you may even know loved ones or had some experiences, and you know that also. But anyway, for Kent County, we look at numbers that for alcohol, and this is did you use in the last 30 days? That's why it's called 30-day use. So in the 30 days leading up to this survey, did you use? And this is these are very reliable surveys. Young people tend to be very honest. So for the purposes of these surveys. So and it's consistent. You see over the years, you see consistently in the percentage. So look how close this is over the years. And it is going down slightly, but it's still higher, way higher than Maryland is. And then it's Caroline County's up there pretty high too, but they've been able to drop. So for marijuana, 30-day use, it's going up. It's going up everywhere. And I'm sure you could guess a story behind that about why that's happening too. But Kent African Americans are disproportionately higher. This is a big difference here. Caroline County is lower, and then here's where Maryland is, but here we go again for Kent County in general being higher. And then prescription drugs, they ask in the survey, I'm simplifying it here, but the question in the survey, and by the way, if you want to dig into some great data, the Youth Behavior Risk Survey is online for all 3 years, and there's 100 and some questions. It asks about everything, like do you binge drink? Are you drinking and driving? Are you vaping? All those kinds of questions. And if you want to know data about kids, the YRBS is the perfect place to go. And by the way, when you get these sheets, the names of all the sources are in there, and then there's another document that we have with the exact links. That's still a work in progress until this is absolutely finished up. But it's going to include a data link whenever there is one. Sometimes we were handed data, like from Shelley and Lisa, or they sent it by email, and it wasn't a link. So some things don't have a link, but most of the data does have a link. Prescription drugs, there we are in Kent County, and went down, and then it came back up again, and this is worrisome, to me too, because we're generally higher than Maryland, not by a lot, but enough. So then there's the charts to go with that. Okay, my hand just wants to get hung up under here. Let me go next to suicide. And for Kent County, these are all ages in this column, and then age 10 to 19 in this column. And, one person is too much. So this is disheartening to know that this has happened in our county. There was 2 years ago, Queen Anne's County had 13 suicides in 1 year. And I don't know if you remember years ago when they had the cluster suicides. That was a lot of people here weren't born then. It was in the 80s. Bill probably remembers, right, Bill? Do you remember the class? I shouldn't be laughing, but I'm just laughing about teasing him about his age. But there was a series of 4 in the high school at Queen Anne's County High School. Lisa's remembering because her dad was working in pupil services at the time. So, and there was one suicide, and then they started copycatting. So, or that's what they thought was going on there. And there was several children that knew each other, students that knew each other that had done a pact. Anyway, very, very sad, and we don't want that happening here either. So I put a big caution there and big red flag too. Now I went back to the youth behavior risk survey then for sad and hopeless feelings, and I know a lot of us feel that at different times, especially when the world seems uncertain. But we see increases going on here. I mean, marked increases, and up to 31% for African Americans, and look higher than the state of Maryland, but it looks like everybody's going up. So that just says to me, whatever strategies can be put in place, and this isn't the school's responsibility, it's not just the church's responsibility, it's not just the parents' responsibility, it's everyone. So, and I'm sure there's a lot that's already being done. So any questions about healthy children before I move on? Those are the key indicators for healthy children. And what's our time looking like? Okay, we're good. I'm going to go a little faster. Children entering school ready to learn. So there's only one indicator for that, and that's the kindergarten readiness assessment, which changed a couple years ago. So we only have 4 years here because 2014 was a whole different instrument that they used to look at readiness. Now, the good thing about Kent County is it has like the highest score in the state, or the second highest. I can't remember. Is it the highest? Yeah. And look, African American subgroup up to 64, and how that compares to Caroline and the state of Maryland. But we also looked at all the domains, and social and personal doing great in this area. This is one of those celebration things to be up this high, to 75 and 79%. And then you go, so there's the composite. Oh, and by the way, so the kindergarten assessment has 4 domains in it. It's got a composite, or is it 5? It's 5. It has a composite, which is everything together, and then it has social, physical development, reading and literacy, and then math. So all those are here for a purpose, and that is because I want you to look at what is happening. Even though we have that high score that was brought up by physical development and social, you look at literacy and mathematical thinking, and here we have some disparity again showing up. So even though we have a lot to be happy about and to celebrate, there's also some more work that needs to be done. That's what that says. And we saw that also repeating under school success, too. The challenge with that has been, let me see, go down to here so you can see this one, too, and then I'll move on to the next one. So physical development, look at this, 76 and 86. I mean, that's incredible. That's a lot to be proud of. Okay, then you go to school success, and those indicators are truancy, English language arts, and math. So there's some red flags in there, and cautions are the truancy, and cautions are bullying. And I don't know, what we can do as a group about electronic bullying, but I know that that's a challenge for a lot of households. So this is just as a reference to the school enrollment, and I only highlighted this because my colleague Jenny did this, and I thought, how can somebody be less than one race? I don't understand that reference there, and I'm sure she's got, or is that greater? That's greater than one race. Okay, all right. Now I get it. That's my dyslexia. That thing had completely turned this way in my head. Okay, so now I know. So that's more than one race. But anyway, here's our enrollment for the schools. And then we couldn't get the breakdown by ethnicity and race yet because it's not available. I mean, this number is hot off the presses from last week. That's how many kids are in the Kent County school system, 1918. But you see how the distribution occurs. Now, truancy kind of going up a little bit there, and that's in the upper grades too. And so that's why that's yellow cautioned, or it might be red. No, it's yellow. Okay, and then we look at school absenteeism, and real interesting here because in this subgroup situation, African American students are performing much better. So whatever the parents are doing and the grandmas are doing to make sure those kids get in school, they're doing a great job too. Lots of other parents are as well. So that's a good thing to see across the board because truancy has really gone down overall. And okay, so now we're going to look at English. And we were having a little bit of trouble, I'll be honest with you, understanding, because the tests have evolved. The academic achievement tests have evolved over the years, and understanding what they meant. And usually they report, like the kindergarten assessment, they report in sequences. So if a child is moving or approaching their grade level or emerging into their grade level, or whatever words are used depend on the test, we were trying to then combine those numbers so we would know who passed and who didn't pass. And because that's a simpler number to track, and that helps us know a little bit more where some help is needed or resources are needed, or how our community is doing. So here we are with English Language Arts, and this is, let me just double check on something for a minute here to see how this is worded. It is, what's the definition? The percentage and number of students meeting level 4, because we looked at 4th grade, or exceeding level 5 PARCC performance. So we looked at 4th grade, 7th grade, and algebra. It should be algebra 10 in the 10th grade. And so here's level 4. This is grade 4, so that we see how our students are doing in this area. And this is not good because these are very low numbers for math. In some areas, the numbers are coming up. Like in Kent County, they were coming up, and then there was a drop here. And then for grade 7 and math, we saw some disproportionality, a lot of disproportionality for our African American subgroup compared to the full group there. But have seen strides. I mean, it's natural for trends to fluctuate, but you can see too where with the full group things are improving. And I'm sure it's tough for the schools too because they're trying to, there's different tests. As I said, the tests are evolving. So even it's hard to look at comparisons over 5 years when the tests have changed. Let's see what else. This is, let me see. It seems like there was something else here. Where's the grade 10? Oh, there's Algebra 1, or it's for the 10th graders. I knew it was there somewhere. So again, we're seeing disproportionality there, and then there's been a drop in algebra for our they're in high school. Okay, quickly, bullied on school property. Boy, is that a colorful chart. And Jenny did this one, and she thought it was very important to represent gender as well as the other subgroups. So you can see that this is the percentage in the last month that have been bullied on school property. And you can see that what's really cool about this is that the numbers are going down for the most part. But still, for females, that's the highest group that are feeling like they're being bullied, too. So I wanted to point that out. Okay. And then there's self-reporting electronic bullying, and we're seeing some, there were some high numbers, but that has come down. But again, the female group is the highest for here too. And I think that's it for this group. Okay, any questions about school success? Did I miss anything? I just need to roll over here to make sure I didn't. Okay, we're good. No questions? Okay. All right, we're going to go with schools completion now. And this is, we're looking at the indicators. They look really, really good across the board. But some of the indicators, we were only getting access to 1 year, and that's kind of normal for that. So we really don't know whether they're going up or down. So there's also another great data site, and it is called, for school, does anybody know what it's called? Yeah, that's really great too. Report card, Maryland report card. It's written mdreportcard.org. And you can look up the county and then look up the school, look up the grade, look up by subgroups. And most of the time that works really well. There's a glitch in the site. And I did send an email like a month ago saying that it was going on. We were trying to look at free and reduced lunch program and look at that by subgroup too. And every time we would click on the filter for African Americans, it would go to student mobility. Rosemary had that experience too. And anyway, it's not correct yet because I checked it again a couple days ago. Well, it might be by today. You know, something happened. I had already done all the health indicators up to 2016 because that was the latest year they had. And I checked it. I think I don't know if it was Friday or Sunday, and they had put 2017 on. And I was like, oh my, I can't turn this in without having all the 2017, but I'm so tired. But anyway, we got all the 2017 in, and that was because Rosemary was very patient with me working on it yesterday. So that happens too, and it may be that now the data that we needed on the Board of Ed is corrected now. And so this at the front is the school enrollment again, just as a reference point. We like to put that at the beginning of tabs specific to the result areas, certain result areas. So this is students with disabilities graduating, and look at that, 94.7%, higher than Caroline County and Maryland. That's great. Students completing program completion with graduating with a certificate. Let's see, what's this percent of special education students receiving a Maryland high school certificate? And we've got a note here about it not being available, so I need to dig into that a little bit further too. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, let's see, what else do we have here? Minimum requirements. This is the percentage of graduating students who completed course requirements that would qualify them for the admission to University of Maryland or an improved career and technology program, or both. Wow, look at that. That's very impressive, and it's way higher than Maryland is too. And we could not get that by subgroup for that site. And then, this shouldn't be here, this curve rating, but I'll take it away another time. I was going to do these real cute little hands ups and hands down and all, but the Excel did not like it, and it kept kind of corrupting the cell. So I tried to get rid of all of them, but I could see I missed one. Anyway, percentage of students who drop out, this is the 4-year adjusted cohort, which means That's 9th grade to 12th grade on time graduation. Yeah. So it's so low. I mean, it's so low that there are no numbers for some of them. It just says less than 3%. I just remember when it was way up there years ago. There's been a lot of work in that area. Oh, there's another one of those little hand things. I didn't like, too, that the hands weren't multicultural. That was another problem I had with these hands. It's the same way I feel about Band-Aids. But, so educational attainment, and this is for a bachelor's degree. I wrote in here a follow-up because I want to add high school to that, too. But this is bachelor's degree, and that's where we are for the percentage, and it's gone up. So something's happening there that more students are seeking that. So that's fantastic, too. Okay, that's school completion. Anybody have? Yes. No, it indicates just the year that they ask the question of that group. So they do, and let me read it again to make sure the percent of our young, it's from the population estimate. So they estimate annually what percentage of the population has achieved that when they get to a certain age. Is it 24, I think, is when they look at that? They ask all 24-year-olds. Can't remember. Good question. Yeah. In fact, well, I don't want to insert my opinion, but I think that any indicator issue that we come across is really a collective community. It's the adage way before Hillary Clinton said it, but the African proverb that says that it takes an entire village to raise a child. I'm right behind there, and I'll say it. But anyway, so the idea is for us all to take responsibility instead of assigning blame. Yeah. So I think that's an example of a lot of things that are happening. And, of course, there are agencies that are taking the lead, and guiding us and helping to coordinate, whether it's the public school system or social services or juvenile services or the local management board. Better say the local management board, most definitely. But it's all of us. Okay, so then employment and career. This one needs a little bit more work. We've been having trouble getting accurate data, and I thought I had that nut cracked a little bit more, but then I ran into a problem. But I'm going to get that solved. But here we are with youth employment ages 16 to 19, and I divided it up because you'll see why youth employment and youth unemployment, and then ultimately getting a better handle on youth 16 to 24 who are not in school and not working. But anyway, for these two tables, you can see the differences here in employment. Naturally, if you're a teenager, you might be less likely to be employed than if you're a little bit older. But this is that opportunity youth age group. And then what I did is, and I want to dig a little bit deeper with this too before the end of the month, is I took, when I went to the census data and designed a table with filters, it wouldn't give me the subgroup of African American just for 16 to 24-year-olds. It kept giving me that for the whole employed or unemployed population. So that's why those numbers are identical here. But I know those numbers separately for those groups are there, and I am going to find them. But anyway, here we are with youth employment. And it looks like it's increasing. Sometimes I see data that's contrary to observation, so it's good to look at data. Except for 16 to 9-year-olds, it's been fluctuating, kind of going up slightly. But for 20 to 24-year-olds, it's increasing. It looks like employment is increasing. But again, look at the difference between these two groups here. And then youth unemployment, That's the one that we want to keep down, and it's still pretty high, especially among subgroups, but overall in the county for the 20 to 24-year-olds. That's why this population of opportunity youth is so important to the local management board in this county and many other counties too, because if unemployment's that high, what are these young people doing? Some are in school or in training, hopefully, but there's a lot that are not. So that's an area of concern. So next, this is a table that is in process. I didn't think the data that I had found was that reliable, so I'm going to fill that in and check back. It's a check back for me. Okay, any questions about employment and career? And I also was thinking about adding that great table that the public school system has where it says what the intentions are. It's from the survey that the seniors take. And then there was something else I wanted to add. I keep thinking of things to add. And that was I don't know if you know about this, but economic development. The Workforce Investment Board at Chesapeake College did a survey a couple years ago. And they asked students in this county and in Queen Anne's County and Cecil County a series of questions, and you can filter it by county about what their hopes were for the future of their career. And I want to include that too, so I'm going to add it. Let's see. So next is communities are safe for children, youth, and families, and the 3 indicators are child maltreatment, juvenile services complaints, and 1-year recidivism. And Bill can chime in anytime, especially if I say something that's inaccurate. Hopefully I won't. But anyway, we were still getting this data in the last couple of days. And I saw, and Shelley and Lisa are aware of this, especially at the state level, I see contradicting numbers. So we're trying to get that polished. But it looks like from the child maltreatment rate that there's an uptick. And I don't know if you agree with that or not. Okay, and Lisa's saying no. So we're working on getting that clarified. And then we're trying to get straight the number of investigations. I did talk to, sometimes it's better to go to the local agency for the data than the state, because you do see some real differences. But anyway, so there we are with that, and that's not available by subgroup. And then juvenile services complaints, that was what I pulled out of the data resource guide from juvenile services just to see what those numbers were doing. And then the reason that I have these highlighted, the number and the percentages for Kent, is because you can see the disproportionality here very clearly in complaints for African American youth. And so juvenile services is one of the first agencies that started tracking relative rate index, where they divide the number of people in a subgroup with the larger subgroup to see how likely it is for that subgroup to, when disparity is showing, to be in that circumstance. So for juvenile services, their relative rate index says it's almost 4 times more likely for an African American to be known to juvenile services than it is for a white person. Or anyway, so it's compared to the white population, and so they started that, and not just here locally, but OJJDP, I guess it was, the Office of Juvenile Justice Prevention. But I think I first heard that probably from Bill or somebody else locally, that existed. And also the prison system is doing that too. Although I tried like crazy to get that information. I actually even found a database online, and it was sideways. Doesn't that drive you crazy? But it was the Office of Corrections for Public Safety and Corrections for the state, and they actually listed all the numbers by race and age at the state facilities. But it was really a difficult piece of data to manage. It was a lot of strings of numbers and a lot of acronyms that weren't identified or defined. And it was sideways, and it looked like one of those old computer printout sheets that somebody had scanned in the wrong way. Now, they do have a data portal that was I'm talking about public safety. Juvenile Services has these fantastic data resource guides that they put out every year. Used to be the statistical reports, and now it's the data resource guides. And they're very well organized and provide a lot of great information. You can go online and read those for every year, for every jurisdiction. And that's great. But so public safety had this portal that looked so promising. I got so excited when I found it. This is it, finally. Good data from the prison system. And anyway, it stopped operating in 2015. And it was impossible to use. And I could tell the last entry was 2015, so it's not happening anymore. But I know locally we can get numbers, and our warden is fantastic, so we're going to be working on that too. Okay, so complaints, and then recidivism rates. This is just kind of weird because the recidivism is so low that when you see a number like 66.7% for a rearrest, it looks kind of scary. I mean, we don't want any rearrests, of course. Bill doesn't want that, but the numbers are really low, so it's not really reliable. But I just wanted to put it here anyway for you to look at. Is there anything else that, Bill, you want to add, or anybody have any questions? But I would say that most of when I looked over the complaints, most of them were misdemeanors more than anything else. I mean, I think it was 8% felonies was a low number too, but it was, there have been some issues, but mostly not very serious. Would you agree with that? Yeah, that's what I saw. Yeah, I saw it's really changed. Yeah. Okay, any questions about that? And then the last one, any questions? All right, we're going to go to Safe Families, and you guys have been so great. And I'm just going to, is it okay if I finish this up, and then if you need to scoot out to take a bathroom break or something, can do that? Okay, great, because we're so close here. So this is, that was interesting too. Families are safe and economically stable. Really important result area. Homelessness, we don't like that. I see it from my shop in downtown Chestertown, right in the park, across from the shop. There's some homelessness going on around here, and it's way more than I remember when I had my office in town for 17 years. And so any numbers are concerning to us. And then we were able to get information. I don't know if you realize this, but the Kent County Public School System asks, usually around September 30th, if a student, here's how, let me show you how it's worded here. Enrolled in the public school system who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence or who are awaiting foster care placement. So some students are couch surfing, and that would include them if you know and if they admit to it. And there's a lot more of that, it seems like, going on. So we have those numbers for Kent County on the number of students, and it seems to be dropping. We see that higher poverty rates going on, but yet these kind of numbers are dropping, and some other numbers are dropping that are economic indicators. I'm not sure why that's happening, but that's a good story behind the curve discussion. Then Midshore Behavioral Health also keeps numbers, so we compared Caroline to Kent County, and here's Caroline's and here's Kent County's numbers. Low again, a little higher last year, and then they dropped. Okay, you know about child poverty because I already covered it with you, because I put it under demographics because I think it's a good basis for understanding what's going on in the county, and that's why it's up front also. And then free and reduced meals. This is the area that we had the trouble with the site jump into student mobility when we were trying to filter. We know that that date is there somewhere and it'll get corrected, but I can't even imagine being the person that has to manage all that up at the state level. It's wonderful data. It's a wonderful site if you're a data lover. That's Maryland Report Card I'm talking about. It's got some great stuff. And especially if you want to be encouraged, there's a lot of good news there too. So this is receiving free and reduced meals, and that's creeping up too. And then those are the actual numbers on the right-hand side. And then there's the chart that goes with it. Now, out-of-home placements. These are placements for children that are either in foster care or voluntary placement. And the idea is to get a rate. So there's numbers, but then there's also a rate that tells you per 1,000, in this case, ages 0 to 18, where we are with out-of-home placement. The idea is to keep children in the house, of course, and especially in the community, but in the house if at all possible. And there are so many excellent ways to do that with kinship care and with alternative response. Lots of things have progressed over the years in terms of response. But still, we have some numbers here, and this is really good that these are coming down, it looks like. And I'm not sure if this matches with the data that I just got. Is it okay? Is this one okay? All right. I know I put something in this morning that came through this morning, but I was kind of sleepy, and I don't remember what I put in. But exactly. But you know what? Last night I found, because there were still a few voids here, and I just didn't want to put voids in the report. But I found this annual report that goes to the governor on family preservation, and it had all the rates right in there up to 2017. And guess what? It was on the GFC website. I didn't even know it was there. I was trying to fill in those tables. And then grandparents responsible for their grandchildren. That's an important number to look at. So this is the percentage. And look how high it was in 2013, and then it's been dropping down. Wonder what the story is behind that. And then currently or formerly incarcerated individuals. So this comes from an old data source and needs to be better. But this is what we have so far, and then I would like to add the detention center to that. So right now those are state numbers, and then here's what it's looking like in terms of trends. And African American and white, this is the key thing to look at. It's 69.6%. This is actually not a local stat. It's the state stat given by the Governor's Office for Children for us to apply if we need to. They used to, a couple of years ago, they provided very good numbers, but they have not been updated since 2015, including those percentages. So what I did was just take the local numbers and then apply the percentage. I don't like doing that, but that was all I had at that point. So. Okay, any questions about that last one? All right. The last thing I was going to talk about is relative rate index, but I can wait until you get back. Do you need to take a short break? Yeah? Oh, yeah, I'm hearing yes. Okay, so 10 minutes, okay? Can you do it in 10? And then the most exciting parts are coming up. And we need your input on those parts, so thank you. A lot of data that I'm trying to make interesting.
right on the slide. Okay, all right. Right. Use the HSA.
Space. Or just say home. Okay, yeah, I can do that. Because I'm like, and I will. I don't have to do that because I just think it's a different or that way it kind of across the board. I suppose this was the hard time. That's another so nice. The other Yes. Okay. Wow, you guys got quiet so fast. So I'd like you to think about when I'm talking about relative rate index as I'm talking about it, especially for these areas that are concerning. Our next step is going to be the local management board step is going to be to gather together. I'm sorry, I start taking ownership of these local management boards. I start saying "our" and "we," and I hope that's all right. But anyway, is to begin to, well, not begin because they've been doing it for years and years, but to around this assessment, talk to the community about what they think the story is behind some of these ups and downs. And to do that, there's going to be opportunity to gather people from the community together in different formats. So it may be that there's a public gathering or hearing. It may be that there's surveying. There'll be groups, opportunities to come together for discussion groups. Am I accurate with that, Rosemary? And then also interviews, one-on-one interviews may happen too. So what I'd like you to think about while I'm talking about these next two sections, because then we'll get into a suggestion mode from you, is to think about people that should be invited. If you know folks, organizations that can get on the list, and then the local management board can reach out to them, or anybody is interested in helping to help along with that process too, to volunteer with that process. That's what I'm going to be asking after I talk about these next two sections and get your feedback from that too. So be thinking about any groups that you might know. And under the concerning areas, child poverty, late prenatal care, obesity, adolescent substance use, kindergarten readiness, and some of the disparity we were seeing there, and then some disparity in some of the testing that we looked at too. And I just want to say that there's good news about testing too. It's just that we happen to select some age groups and some composite areas that maybe weren't as progressively improving as some of the other areas are. Youth employment and unemployment and juvenile service complaints and hunger and formerly incarcerated, family members and loved ones of formerly incarcerated individuals, and then opportunity youth who are between the ages of 16 and 24. So those are, and we have cautions that we're going to continue to look at, that Rosemary's working on that list. But if you can think about this concerning list especially, and what your involvement might be in helping to guide us, or whether you might know some other suggested groups or people, that would be helpful. Okay, so we're going to talk about the relative rate index, which is really a fancy name for a formula that helps you know, especially when you see significant differences between subgroups in circumstance or encounters with the sanctioning system. It's a formula that helps you better understand the likelihood of that subgroup being in that circumstance. So with Rosemary's help, I guess did you go to a conference and see that North Carolina graph you saw? Oh, you just found it somewhere?
Well, there I've seen it.
Oh, okay. All right. So my familiarity with relative rate index was always with the sanction system, the court system, or the criminal justice system. because there's been disparity there and disproportionate minority contact that has been talked about, I guess, for about 15 or 20 years now, maybe longer, officially in the public forum. I'm sure it was being talked about behind the scenes way before that, but it really came to the forefront. So some brilliant person said we could apply the same formula to other areas. And so part of what I did for Roseberry and the elementary board, local management board, was to where I could find data, subgroup data, and where I saw differences that were very obvious, I applied the formula. And Rosemary wanted me to come up with a few economic, education, health, and social or safety opportunities for that. So that's what this graph is. So it shows you, when you see the opportunity index, and it has a number, for example, let me put my glasses on. Unemployment among ages 16 to 24, you see that 2.49 above for the African American subgroup. That means that African Americans are 2.49 as likely to be unemployed times. It's 2.49 times likely to be unemployed than whites. Low birth weight babies, it's almost 2 times as likely for an African American woman to have a low birth weight baby than a white woman. 30-day marijuana use, 1.4 times more likely. And then you go on through there and you see the education, and then finally the juvenile crime, and the rate was the formula for that was done by the state juvenile services office, and they said 4 times more likely to be referred for a complaint. Incarcerated adults, it's 2.4 times more likely. And it may even be higher than that. I had very limited information, as I said. Now, for children living in poverty, and I used all the most recent years that I could get data for that. So that's not multiple years. It's not an average of all the years. It's the most recent year that I had for data for each one of those. That would have been a complicated chart if I started throwing in a bunch of years. But anyway, children living in poverty, and that ended up being lower. Only for this most recent year. That hasn't been the norm in the past, of course, that it would happen to be lower or higher for whites than for African Americans. So that's what that chart is. And the cool thing about a chart like this is it's a lot simpler than looking at all the tables with all the percentages. Right away when you see this number, you say, wow, this is serious, and I think it can be an education tool and a good discussion tool, too. So that's what that's about. Any questions about the relative rate index? And it can be used across lots of different indicators. We just picked some key ones. And it may change before the final version goes into of this document. Any questions at all? Wow. Okay. Yeah, okay. Laura. Is what? Yes, it is.
Just defined by income level.
And different income levels. So depending on the source. So sometimes you see 200% below or 100% below, or living under whatever would be considered the threshold for poverty. So this data is the threshold here.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions?
I would just add that for me it's really important to have this chart, and it's something that we plan to use as part of the local management board to explain that you can't work to address racism and structural racism by just focusing on the school system or the workforce or et cetera, that it's something that appears in every single system, and that we all have to be putting in place measures and policies and practices to intentionally and conscientiously combat that.
Wow. that sounds great. I mean, the way you said that, I could never have said it like that. That's beautiful. Yes, Charlie.
This is in the realm of what I had spoken to about people and organizations and places being in silos. I want to share with you a comment that I heard last night at the opportunity for prospective commissioners for the Board of Education to speak. And as the conversation rotated around to the hiring of minority teachers, there was a question that, or a statement that was made from the audience, basically by two retired African American teachers who live here. And the question they asked, which the underlying piece of it really didn't get answered, and the question was, do you want us? And I think that's a question that really needs to be answered for African Americans here and for African Americans everywhere, and particularly for kids. What this relative rate index shows me is there's a whole heck of a lot of trauma, and I want to suggest that the entire community is complicit, not because people are bad people, but because those of us who need to face into this haven't done so.
The other way.
And if we begin to face into it and we make it clear that we do care and that people matter, things will change. But it's going to require a bunch of energy over time, and it's going to take money as well. And all of those are decisions that those who have all those things need to be committed to. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. And Rosemary. Okay, any other questions or comments to add to this? Okay, so one more thing. Oh, do we have a handout for that? Does everybody have it? The geo-mapping handout? Oh, okay. All right, well, that's all right, because I can just explain what's going on. That's fine. All right, so the other thing that we did as part of this data diving was we interviewed various agencies and individuals in the community that had access to a lot of this data that we're looking at. And we know Washington College does geo-mapping, and that is, if you don't know what it is, it's when you, whatever the circumstances or issue is or indicator is, you map it by location. Address, sometimes it's a very precise address, like the sexual predator registry, those are very precise addresses. Or maybe by a general location, because people's privacy is important also at the same time. And the local management board is very aware of this, but they want to be able to utilize geo-mapping in appropriate ways for understanding better where the cluster of circumstances or indicators are occurring in this community. And obviously that's so that some saturation can occur in those places. Now we might say, oh, well, it's probably Rock Hall and Chestertown. But there may be other pockets, and there may be pockets within those areas too, that some that we're aware of and some we may not be aware of and be totally surprised about. So it's a sensitive subject also because of, maintaining privacy. But the other issue is that a lot of the agencies are short-staffed, and to try to pull this information out and collect it without names, and I'm saying that wouldn't include any names, but pulling this information out is tough when there's short staff, there's funding has been lowered, and then here's another thing to do. Washington College has been doing geo-mapping for the highway safety program, for the detention center for crime center, they said. But anyway, there's crime-related data that they're already keeping. And so we reached out to them and are just trying to open a conversation with them about the possibility of supporting a geo-mapping effort. And we also did a survey of individuals at agencies in the community asking, are they interested in geo-mapping? And just about everybody said they were, and just about everybody said they're not currently doing it, or they don't have the staff to do it, or they don't have the equipment to do it. It's not a part of what they do. We were also trying to find out if at the state level was it being done. Maybe some of the local agencies are sending it up and they're doing their thing in Baltimore, Annapolis, and maybe we're not aware of it. So we got, what I would say overall we got back in that survey was some real interest in it. You know, that the discussion is open to look at that. And also with geomapping, the clusters can be looked at in a lot of different ways, not just by location, but in other ways too, by race, by ethnicity, by age, by gender, a lot of different ways. And what it ultimately helps is for a local organization or for this community to understand where some saturation may be needed. So anyway, we talked to, thank you, we talked to social services, the health department, juvenile services, midshore and behavioral health, the public schools, Kent County Detention Center, the sheriff, the workforce development and adult learning office too, and that was the only office that really wasn't interested. They said that they know that there's some other places that data can be pulled from, but everybody else seemed interested and said, you know, we'd like to talk about this further. We'd like to get involved. So that was one other piece of this. And then the idea would be in the next phase to look into that further and possibly gather some groups together, and maybe there might even be some opportunity to try a geomapping project. Is there anything you want to add to that, Rosemary? Did I get that right? Okay, good. Okay, so last piece for today, and I thank you so much. Do you have any questions about geomapping? I forgot to ask at all. Is anybody doing that or had any experience with that?
Sure. I'm not doing it, but I would like a one-sentence definition.
You could map, where students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, where do they live in the county? And so then you could see if, one community or one area of the county is, experiencing that.
Maybe they could create a community garden there. One thing leads to another. That's great. Okay. So the last portion of this that we would like to ask your help on is considering some of the concerning areas, and we will be writing this down, whatever your suggestions are, or you can also put them on your cards, your suggestion cards too. Is what are there groups or individuals that you, other than the obvious that are already here, but that you believe are important to bring to the table, especially in terms of our interest in disparity, disproportionality? Are there groups that need to be at the table?
And I think for questions of time, the best way to go about that is if you're interested in a specific result area. So I put the numbers next to the indicator, so 1 through 8, because the first one is healthy babies, the second one is healthy children, etc. And so you can put, and maybe can we see all of the, I can put up a sheet from the internet that shows all of the result areas. But if you say you're from DJS and you're interested in partnering with the LMB on juvenile service complaints, etc., that indicator, a point. Or you can think of someone else that should be there at that table that would be able to provide context about the data. Put that on your index card. So you can just write the number and you can write the partners that you think are important stakeholders for that result area, and indicator point if you want to be more specific. And I'll show you the 8 result areas. Does that make sense?
And this would be a card that you might want to put your name on in case.
Does everyone have an extra card? So those are the 8 results. You can see babies born healthy is 1, healthy children is 2, children enter school ready to learn is 3, children are successful in school is 4, and on.
You enlarge that.
I can try. I don't see it. Zoom. There you go,
Yep.
Myra. Oopsie.
If you have anything you want to say out loud too about that,
Yeah.
feel free.
Yes.
So Sabine Harvey was here earlier from the University of Maryland Kent County Extension Office, and they want to put together a food summit to partner food growers, farmers, people who have gardens, who have excess produce that they could then get to the people who need it. A lot of food banks won't take perishables because it's hard to manage. I think St. Martin's Ministries is pretty good at doing it, but locally it's difficult to have the refrigeration and stuff. So they're going to aim to do that in January, and they also want to enable some job training with that, and maybe down the road having their own garden plot somewhere in the county. So look for information in the next month or two.
And in terms of food security, that's a really exciting development. We had a forum on food security specifically last year, and Sabine came, but we had the college was there because they have a sustainable initiative, and they're doing a lot of work on campus to make everything more edibles instead of just decorative, and partnering with the community table, which is a really wonderful initiative as well. You have over 100 people every week coming and having dinner together from all walks of life. And who else? We had, Maryland Extension and the backpack program and some of our regular programs that do serve populations who also experience hunger. So
there's
that's
so much food waste,
right. Yeah.
It would be nice to.
There's a lot of potential for better coordination and more efficiency when it comes to food. And
I was talking actually to Arlene Lee about that. For the Maryland Food Bank, everything has to go to one FedEx in Tennessee or wherever. Has to go to one place and then be distributed. That's absurd.
Yeah. Can you get the mic to Sharon?
Sorry.
I just wanted to follow up about a question that was asked earlier about the Caroline County prenatal care. I emailed the health officer, Atelier Zarello, and he just responded. It says, yes, they do. They have a nurse practitioner. He gives her name. And it says, our regular funds were cut, but we were given other funds to run a prenatal clinic on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And it says they're still waiting for that budget to be approved by Baltimore. So I just wanted to follow up with that.
People from other counties can go there.
I don't think so. I think it's strictly for Caroline County.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think because from what I understood before, because of the funding, it's the administration is strictly for Caroline.
Okay, all right.
Chaptake Health, they do a lot of uninsured care. I'm not sure if it's specifically prenatal care, but I know in Caroline County it was strictly for Caroline County residents.
Mm-hmm.
That may have changed, but maybe.
Thank you for checking. That's nice of you. Okay. Any other questions or suggestions? You're all just busy writing. That's great. We appreciate it. I know it's almost lunchtime. guys have been very kind to sit here when your stomachs are probably growling. Does anybody need any more cards? You good? Okay.
Like if you know of an agency that should be involved, that's great. But if there's a specific point of contact in that agency, that can be helpful when we start inviting and convening these conversations.
What's your timeline for the next phase to have the conversations?
It'll be between November and March.
Okay. Good.
But we'll probably do another phase in FY19 as well, or 20. Yeah. FY20.
Okay. It's like, is it FY20 already? But
it's FY19 right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in closing, and Rosemary might have something else to say too, but just to thank all the folks that helped get data to Jenny and I, and because several of you are here in the school system, and the health department, and the social services too, and we really appreciated that, and it helped to make our job easier. So sometimes it seems like it's kind of harder to mine for data than it used to be. But so all that extra effort that you took out of what you normally do during the day was very much appreciated. So, and it's such an honor too to be with you during this time, and that you came. You could have been a lot of other places right now, and so thank you very much for coming and listening to the overview. And as I said before, this is going to be finalized within the next few days, and then the local management board will have it for anybody that wants an emailed copy of it. So, if you think of anything afterwards too, don't hesitate to email Rosemary, and she'll make sure that I get the information. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Just thank you so much to everyone for coming, and I know it's a little dry, but this is really the foundation of moving forward, and I really want to thank Linda and Jenny Randolph for doing all of this work for us. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very excited to be able to have this resource.
Okay, it's time to eat lunch. Yay! Thanks, everybody.
I can see it.
No, we're just gonna...
Okay.
Don't forget to cash your card in.
Some of them may put them on the table back.
Very nice. Oh, thank you.
I'm going to turn off the live feed.
Do that. All right,
Hold on. I'll oh, we're off. Buttons are a little...